Hey guys, how's it going? Well, I've made quite a few topics about the van lately, and I thought I'd go off in a bit of a different direction today. Mix it up a bit. Um, so, what I'm going to talk about is my biggest fear, and it's kind of a fear that most people handle through long-term planning, and it's sort of in a roundabout way. It's related to van dwelling. Now, first of all, I would say that I'm not a person who lives my life in fear. I've known people in my life that they're always afraid of what might happen, or this particular individual's behavior, or what happens if you do this, or what happens if you don't follow every procedure to the exact letter. um, People read their bill from the sign a MasterCard bill, and they'll read it like 4 or 5 times to make sure everything's correct. I mean, I think there's a point of being responsible and being thorough to make sure that everything is in order. But it's like if you're constantly worried that you left the iron on at home or something, or the stove on, that it becomes unhealthy to me. So I don't, that's called, I think it's like balance. So I'm not a person who lives my life in fear, but there's a particular issue that I do think is concerning for me, and it has to do with getting old. And it doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily about getting old and having less life, less time to live on this planet, because even though I'm a spiritual person, I'm myself a Buddhist or a quasi-Buddhist. I don't really believe in life after death. I sort of believe in reincarnation, but then again, I have a hard time believing in things that are supernatural. So I know it's kind of like a paradox of sorts, you might say. But I don't have all the answers. I know that for sure. But I don't believe that there is life after this life. Not in the way that we know it. Not in this form. And if it's not in this form, if it's in a different form, then is it really happening? I mean, if you're not aware that, you say reincarnation, for example, if you're not aware that you're reincarnated, what's the point? If you're not aware that in a previous life you lived in, 17th century Japan, and now you're living in 21st century Canada, then the unawareness or the non-awareness means that it's like you have to go into some kind of deep psychotherapy or hypnosis or whatever some people might say you need to do to discover that. Then I don't really think, it seems like disingenuous to me. Anyway, so getting old is not really the issue. Getting the old and wondering, about the years left on the planet is not the issue, because I think that dying is just like sleeping without dreaming. It's the actual process of dying may be painful, but once you're dead, you're dead. So it's not scary, because it's just you don't exist. But it's the time period before you die. For example, say the average male, since I'm a male, lives up into the late 80s, maybe early 80s. Now, my family, I have a genetic disposition to live a long time. My grandfather is about 89 years old, and his father lived into his mid to late 90s. And our generation or this generation is supposed to live in longer than previous generations, which means I could make 100. I mean, I don't think I will, but it's a possibility. So the question becomes, what happens when you get old and you can't take care of yourself? What happens when you're no longer able to lift a weight above 10 pounds? Or, you can't drive. And that's the thing that is my biggest fear, is being vulnerable to the point where I can't take care of myself. Because, I've never been a person to ever have a handout. I've never been on what we call up here in Canada welfare. I've never taken a handout. I just haven't. It's not. If I really, really needed to, would I? Yes. But I've always been in a position, partly through effort and hard work, and partly through luck, I think, where I've never had to rely on the social system to help me out. But as you get older, think of it this way. Most people, well, at least in the past, you buy a house, you build a bunch of equity into this house, you sell it for, just say, $200,000. In BC, that's Vancouver. It's unheard of to buy a house for $200,000. Maybe a small condo. But so then you have this house, you have all the equity that you built up in your entire life, and you paid off your house, and you have all this money. Now, when you retire, a lot of people will either buy a smaller house when the kids leave, or they'll get a condo or something. And they'll have a bunch of that money available, so that when they get really old, you know what they do? They take that money and they pay for a retirement home. And the more money you have, the better care you're going to get. And it's a sad reality of our world, or our society, is that the old, vulnerable people are not looked after properly, in my opinion, if they don't have a lot of money. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories, or read a lot of horror stories where, old people in these retirement homes, I'm talking about people that are, in their last years of life, and they have to wear a diaper or something, and maybe their diaper gets checked every 3 or 4 hours. Meanwhile, you're sitting in your own feces and you're getting a rash, and it's uncomfortable and it stinks. If you have a strong mind but your body is not able to take care of yourself, or maybe your mind isn't that strong either, who's going to look after you? Who's going to care? Sure, your kids will care to a point, but you can't really. I don't want to be a burden to my kids. I mean, I really don't. Anyway, to me, that's kind of up to them, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to burden anybody. I hate being a burden to people, and I like to be independent, and I like to rely on my own strength and my own intelligence and hard work to make sure that I'm looking after myself. And when you get to the age where you're no longer able to do that, that's my biggest fear, because there's no guarantees. You could be of sound mind, but sitting in a wheelchair in some old retirement home, that's basically because you haven't, getting back to that equity thing, because person who lives in their van, a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck. And what happens when you get old and you retire, and you're basically barely surviving on the government old age pension. I mean, up in Canada, you get old age pension is $600 a month, and what do they call the other one? Canada Pension Plan is $600 a month. So basically, you get $1,200 a month total. Now, if you worked a job that gave you retirement as well, then you're in better standing. But a lot of people don't have that. And so what happens? $1,200, you cannot survive in Vancouver, British Columbia on $1,200. I mean, rent is $1,200. So that you can't, I mean, you got to eat. You got to pay for heat and stuff. So, that's a big question mark in my mind, is what's going to happen when I get old, because I'm not building up any equity in anything. I'm not saving thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, when my kids are older and I don't have to make child support payments, then I will be able to save money. But by that time, I'm going to be in my mid to late 50s. I'm going to have another, 10 or 15 years before I'm going to retire, hopefully. So will the money be there? Scary. That's my biggest fear, no doubt about it. Now, of course, there's the other side of the coin on this issue. A lot of people will work their entire lives and sacrifice so much for that last, let's say, 10 years of your life. Let's say up until the age of 80, you can look after yourself fairly well, but say you're not going to live past 90. Most people won't. In that 10 years between 80 and 90, when you're the most vulnerable, that is that time of the life when a lot of people work their butts off their entire life for, I know I'm simplifying things, but for that 10 years, they scrimp and save for retirement, and they have that a lot of money so that they can pay, the $3,000 or $4,000 for the high-end retirement home, and to make sure you're well looked after. But so you're going to sacrifice your entire life, work yourself to the bone, buy into this capitalist notion of the American dream, or working your butt off to buy stuff to impress people who you may not even like. And it just seems like a big, huge waste of time, because that time of your life is gone, and there's nothing more important than your time, than that time to enjoy life. I mean, you look at some of the tribes in the in African and South American countries, like the old tribes that we so call them uncivilized. But they'll work like 16 or 20 hours a week. They'll do their hunting and they'll gather their food. And then the rest of the time, what do? They paint their faces. They adorn themselves with various jewelry things, like rings on their neck or bones in their ears or whatever. They're recreating. They're enjoying themselves. And they have everything they need. They have a fire, they have food, they have warmth. So in North America, we work most people work 40 hours a week. Some people work like 50, 60. If you own your own business, those people work a lot. And that's why I've never been interested in owning my own business. But it's like, who's more civilized? The people that work, 60 hours a week, or the people who work 20 hours a week. And it's all about, I guess, what you want in life. If you have to have the latest cell phone, the latest generation iPhone that's come out, now they have the iPhone 7, now I need the iPhone 8. 6 months later, they got the iPhone 9 out. Well, you better get that one. It's just a big rat wheel that people run on, and they're just, I know I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, because most van dwellers are, they're pretty astute to those kinds of things. They know what's up with all that. But so the danger is in wasting your life accumulating possessions instead of enjoying life. So yeah, not only is that the danger, but also the question of you're sacrificing so much of your life's energy and time for those last 10 years. And some say enjoy it, and enjoy life as much as you can, and don't worry about those last 10 years. Anyway, I could talk about this a lot longer, but I think I'm going to repeat myself and talk in circles a little bit. So essentially, my biggest fear is being old and vulnerable and not being able to look after myself. I like to be able to be independent and rely on myself, not be a burden on anybody. And when I'm no longer able to do that, that's a big concern. Anyways, guys, I'm going to end it there. Thanks for watching. Take care. Have a good night.